Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the DMZ. Bill Scher, I saw the Yankees are done. They lost last night, so that's good news to keep America great again. How are you?
I'm okay. The Australia rules football grand final has happened, but I have not seen it yet. So no spoilers in the thread, please.
It's
going to see it in a couple days.
There's a real danger that you could stumble across news like that inadvertently. It comes up.
You certainly can if you're trying to get the game on YouTube. But
I can't tell you how many times I'm at a boxing match, out for beers with the guys, and somebody will ruin the Aussie rules football match by telling me what happened. It's a real problem.
But did the Hawthorne Hawks get their three-peat, or will the West Coast Eagles bring the trophy home to Perth? I don't know yet, but I can get it on demand at afl.com.au. If anyone else wants to watch, you got to plug in a little cash, but it's worth it. That's all I'm saying. But my childhood Yankee fandom was twinged when they lost in the wild card, but the Mets are still there, so New York is not done, and maybe, just maybe, if the Mets make the series, I'll catch a game and relive the old times.
Yeah, they had some good times. It's funny that they're the sort of redheaded stepchild of New York. That the Yankees get all the claim, but the Mets.
Growing up in the 70s and 80s, I remember Reggie Jackson. I remember the great '86 Mets series. They're good times there. The game has lost its luster for me, but I might still take in a little bit if opportunity presents itself.
Well, the funny thing is, my oldest boy is not convinced that it's over for the Orioles or the Nationals.
So you can get So Burke is how old now?
He's going to be 5 in January.
So he can watch a full baseball game?
No. We watch on iTunes, on the Apple TV. Actually, on the Apple TV, there's like an MLB app, and you can watch game replays at your convenience. So you can just watch like a 3-minute, 3-minute take on the clips of what happened in the game the night before. So I just show him those. That's as good. His 5-year-old sensibility finds even a clip of baseball to be interesting. Yes, because this is just the most exciting clips. This is like Chris Davis hitting a home run, somebody stealing a base or getting thrown at. This is just like a 3-minute bet. Like if you took a 9-inning, 3-hour-long game and condensed it to the best 3 minutes, it's pretty good. It's pretty exciting.
That's how you have a good product there. If you could take away 95% of the game and show you the good 5%, people want to watch.
Yeah. So that's what we do. But it's 162 games a year. So and these games, they don't even start. I mean, like the game last night, the wild card game, didn't even start till 8:30 p.m. So that means best case scenario, you can go to bed at 11:30. How are the children of America going to watch this if on the East Coast? I mean, I understand if you're in California.
It's a travesty.
If you're in California, you can do it. But if they want young people to get into the game, I don't know how that's going to happen at 11:30 at night,
I agree completely. I think it's a travesty. This is a government subsidized monopoly, and the government should step in and mandate family friendly game times.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do. I mean, I seem to remember when I was a kid a lot more day games for playoffs.
Oh, absolutely. No, this is definitely a change. This is a change bowing down to the TV ratings gods.
Yeah, or like there would be games that would start at like 3:30 or 5:30. I remember like getting off school.
You come home from school and watch a game.
Yeah, these were like,
or you might even actually go with your parents to a game if you live near a ballpark.
Yeah. I mean, those are the values that I grew up with, though. I don't know about the kids, what was going on today, but that's why we need to make America great again. That's part of the plan. I mean,
I've not exposed not expose my children to too much televised sports. I have shown my 6-year-old some faces of presidential candidates, and she has told me that her first choice is Hillary Clinton and her second choice is Carly Fiorina. So
wow,
I got no labels household going.
I think
here.
You need a column. I think that's a column. Seriously, I think that's a very interesting development. I think you got a column there. I exposed.
Well, I do think
I exposed my kids to Marco Rubio's announcement, which I deemed to be potentially historic. So they watched that, some of it.
I mean, I do think if you are a parent with girls, you're going to be more inclined. Like, I mean, Carly Fiorina, is never going to get close to the finish line.
I don't know about that, Bill.
You're going to be more inclined. I will put gobs of money on that. If you're deciding on the Democratic side, you are going to be tipped to Hillary in many cases because you got to look your girls in the eye and explain to them why is it that there have been 44 presidents and no women presidents. That's not a fun conversation to have, and you would like to solve that problem as quickly as possible.
No, I mean, my wife and I, we didn't know if we were going to have boys or girls. So, we started thinking about having a family. We were thinking, like, what do we do if we have girls? I mean, because it's so important. We wanted to – my wife's a very – obviously, Erin. I mean, she's a very strong, tough, successful woman. But she's very cognizant of the culture in which we live where, like Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian are glamorized, So – we're trying to think of do we call the kid like Benazir or Thatcher? Like, there weren't like a lot of, I guess Reagan's like a bisexual name, that's a boy or a girl name, but that's sort of, I think, become overdone. Too many Reagans running around. So like we were thinking about things like that. And then how do you
Golda?
There you go.
Golda, Indira.
There you go. We were thinking not just names though, but also like role models or what's it like. Like I think our policy would have been like we weren't going to let her be a cheerleader. We're going to just would not allow it. Like she would have to play sports or something. I mean, we didn't get these ideas really fleshed out because fairly quickly we learned that we were having boys, which I think both of us deemed to be easier potentially.
Well, I can tell you that you may think you are not going to let your girls do gender stereotypical things. That I'm not gonna give them princess stuff. I'm not gonna show them Disney movies and all that. But you know what? They just find it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
In the air.
I agree. I was listening to a podcast a couple years ago. It was Roseanne Cash, Johnny Cash's daughter, was on. I think it was Mark Maron's podcast, and she was saying that even though she's like on all of these anti-gun or gun control, the board of directors of all these gun control groups, she had to buy her kids little guns because like her boys would just pick up sticks and start pretending they were guns and like shooting each other. Right. And our boys, we tried to just sort of subtly discourage them from like weaponry. All they want to do is fight.
You are such a rhino, Matt.
Well, now they have swords.
Isn't Eddie the Eagle in your house teaching them gun safety right now?
They've got these foam swords that they got that some other kid gave. Like they went to some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle themed birthday party, and now they have swords to beat me with. But I'm sorry, I intervened. I think you're right that these kids, it's hardwired. Let me just say, I think this is a conservative thing. I don't think it's the culture even. I think that it's like they are hardwired. Like little boys want to play. They want to fight. They want to kill things. They want to play with trucks mostly. And little girls are kind of drawn to the princess stuff. I think that it's in a way innate. But you've seen little girls as the father of two. Do you agree, or is this all culture?
Well, I'd say I put it a little differently because I have two girls. They fight plenty. they like to scrap. They're not.
But it's
they're not hosting tea parties
sort of
all the
fighting,
time,
right? It's the type where they just
no. There's There's a mix of the psychological and the physical. I think they cover all the bases there. But my understanding is that, around age 3, all children start to become cognizant of gender. You see it everywhere. I mean, you look around, people are dressed differently. People are drawn in books differently. And so you're trying to process, what does that mean? What does that mean about me? And you start developing, simplistic conclusions. I mean, I had my 3-year-old tell me, apropos of nothing we've done, that girls can't be astronauts. And we had to very quickly disabuse her of that notion. Because she's just trying to piece together what these differences amount to. And this is also why you have, transgender children, because some children see that and say, well, that doesn't feel like what I want to be. And when that becomes very visceral and not just kind of, some people are just, some kids are just curious, but some kids, it's a really visceral, this is not me, I am not that, don't call me this boy name anymore. Because at that age, you're trying to make sense of all that. So I would imagine if you created, like a Truman Show world where all the identity indicators were different, and all the boys were princesses and all the girls were soldiers, and you were just immersed in that, you might have a different outcome of what your kids would be attracted to. But I think it's partly just it's a combination, I think, of the biological and the cultural, because you are seeing what's around you and trying to compute that into your mind, what it means about yourself.
Hey, have you seen Frozen? Disney's Frozen yet?
Have I seen
I'm guessing
Frozen?
You've seen it a million times.
But I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old girl. Have I seen Frozen? Right. About 2,000 times.
So my boy's been talking about it for a long time. And I try not to discourage anything because it's deemed to be girls, but you couldn't rent it on iTunes until this weekend, until like October 3rd. You'd have to buy it. And even though I stream Netflix, I don't have a DVD player, so I couldn't. That wasn't an option. So anyway,
you can get on Amazon, and with your Chromecast, you can then take what you get stream on Amazon, put that on the TV.
Well, you've got it all figured out. I'm just a simple Luddite. But anyway, I was finally able to show it to them this weekend. They loved it and want to rent it again. I got to say though, I feel like the Prince got a raw deal in that movie. I do. And someone told me, well, first of all, I mean,
you're the first person I've seen who is pro Hans.
Somebody told me, I went to a dinner party Saturday night after watching this movie, and somebody claimed, I've not fact-checked this, that initially the Prince was going to be the hero, and that then they figured out that was too formulaic, and they changed it. Which is why I felt that way, because he starts off. I mean, is it just me? Am I wrong that the guy seems like he was, for 90% of the movie, the Prince was a pretty good guy, and yes, he was going to kill Elsa. Spoiler alert here, people. Spoiler alert. Yes, he was going to kill Elsa at the end, but she kind of was asking for it at that point. Let's be honest. And by the way, let me just say this. I'll say this publicly. If we're doing the whole Ginger or Marianne thing, I'm Team Anna. Okay, I don't know where you come down on that. I'm Team Anna. Anyway,
I'm gonna take a pass on that debate. Well, two things I want to say about Frozen. So one thing that's interesting about Frozen is I know we're 15 minutes in, haven't talked about politics yet, but I mean. It actually is there was a Disney film called The Princess and the Frog about 10 years or so ago that did really bad at the box office. And Disney concluded that they can't market films anymore with just girls and just princess in the titles because they're missing out on the entire boy market. They want to hit all the demographics. So the trend in Disney movies have been these one-word titles, Tangled, Brave, Frozen, that don't, and the posters don't play up the princesses. And a lot of the Frozen posters, the big so was Olaf, not Elsa and Anna. And Brave, you had a woman there, but she was holding a bow and arrow, so it's all very it's a little bit more seemingly violent in the end. And so they're making a concerted effort to make these films boy friendly and girl friendly at the same time. So it's not surprising to me that they liked it so much. But what was so interesting about Frozen was this is one of the first Disney films that's been co-written, co-directed by a woman, and every plot point of Frozen. Never does the boy save the girl. At every moment, the girl saves the boy, or a girl saves another girl. So every basic, so it's formulaic in many ways, but every formula has that wrinkle in it. Kristoff has fallen off a cliff, and Anna pulls him up.
Well, technically, I think it was the reindeer or whatever he has that pulled him up. Technically, I'm just going to say.
Sven played a role.
And I feel like that was a male animal that did the beast of burden that did all that. I was at this. I told you I went to this dinner party, and I none of these people. It was 3 couples. None of the other 2 couples had any kids. All of them had seen the movie multiple times. I think they both the other couples own the movie.
But have they seen Frozen Disney on Ice like I have?
I don't think so. But I said I was the one guy is sort of a man's man kind of guy, and his wife told me that like she was going to watch the movie and he was like going to humor her. He was going to sit there and like sort of watch it, but like read a book or flip through a magazine. And like 10 minutes in, he's like, and then I forget what it was. He like went to work the next day and came home and they had rented it, and he's like, do you want to watch it again? They had a couple hours left before it expired, and he wanted to watch it again. I mean, so it was real. It's good. It's more action and more interesting than I thought, and not just because I'm a guy and it's ostensibly a girls, quote unquote girls movie, but because I'm an adult and it's a kids movie. And it was good.
But I want you to write the column now. Why Hans had every right to seize power and rule over Annandale. Elsa was some sort of her powers made her dangerous. She needed to be put away. She needed to get some medical attention. She was not safe.
She could have killed her sister. She very easily could have killed her sister. I think that somebody needed to step in. I'm just saying. I think she was quite dangerous.
Let's get down to business here, Matt. Let's get down to business.
All right. I think this is why people listen to us. And let me just say this. I talk about this about. I'm a fan of a lot of the other blogging hit shows, and some of the other shows do have a repartee? I don't know what the word is, but they have a chemistry. But sometimes there are shows where people don't have the reps that we have, and they try to be funny. And it's really, it's really cringeworthy. Some of it when they try to sort of,
unlike us talking about Frozen, which I'm sure had zero cringe at all.
I think what we do works. I think that we've been doing this for years, proven commodity here. But don't try this at home, folks. Don't think that you can just get a dialogue and that you can do what we do here. Because, it's like going to, Pavarotti and saying, teach me how to sing like you. It's just, some people have it, some people don't. Anyway, politics, Bill.
So we have the first Democratic presidential debate. We're taping on a Wednesday, so in 6 days, since we're talking here.
Yeah.
And it's going to be Hillary, going to have Bernie Sanders, going to have Lincoln Chafee, going to have Martin O'Malley, going to have Jim Webb. We probably won't have Joe Biden, even though he's making a whole lot of noise. Maybe we should talk about Biden in a little bit. But the word was that he wouldn't, even if he made an announcement, he wouldn't rush to the first debate. But I got a piece in the queue. We'll see if it gets published or not over at the good people at Politico. Trying to assess how will the field deal with Bernie. I mean, I think that, to me, this is the toughest part of the debate for everybody. Bernie has become the embodiment of the progressive conscience of the party, at least for white progressives. And you can't, so you can't attack him like you would attack a typical rival. Because he's like your lovable, grumpy grandpa, and it's like kicking your grandpa in the face if you attack him. So, usually when there's, a woman in a debate,
he was asking for it. I'm just going to say it. Just like Elsa. But anyway.
Who will be the Hans in the Democratic debate?
And who's better, Hans Gruber or Frozen Hans as a villain?
That's a tough call. Obviously, Bernie is putting a lot of heat on Hillary, and she has to be very careful how she responds to that. She's starting to bring up points of difference without using his name. For example, she said that she would repeal the law that gives gun manufacturers legal liability when their guns are used in crimes. It so happens that Bernie voted for that law in 2005 when he was in the House, but she lets the reporters make that connection. She doesn't say it herself.
And Biden also, didn't Biden support, didn't Biden vote against some gun control bills in the Senate?
I don't think he did in the 90s or the decade after. Maybe there was something when he was younger. Mm-hmm. The big issue with Biden, the two parts of his legislative record that I'm aware of that would cause him trouble. One is the 1994 crime bill, which has good things that he likes to tout, like the Violence Against Women Act was tucked into that bill. That's the capstone of his legislative legacy. But that also has, and I think the assault weapons ban might have been in that. I can't remember if that was separate or not, but he voted for that. But also all of the, pro-incarceration policies that liberals despise now and some conservatives despise now were in that 94 crime bill, and Biden was very vociferous in defending those aspects at the time. So he would be called on the carpet about that for sure. And there's also the bankruptcy bill, which a lot of liberals, particularly Elizabeth Warren, rail against as being a quintessential example of the rules being rigged for the banks. Biden coming from Delaware, where a lot of those financial services corporations were based. He took the lead in that bill. And Hillary very recently, because she has a bit of a complicated history with that legislation, she voted for a version of it in 2001, which ended up not becoming law, and then did not vote on a later version that did become law. And then she said after the fact that she would have voted against it. Warren, in one of her books, criticizes Biden and Clinton for their role in that earlier version. Recently, Clinton said, "Hey, I only voted for that because I was trying to get a certain plank amendment added to that, and the price for me getting that amendment in was Biden specifically telling me, well, you have to vote for this if I'm going to put this in my bill." So that's one case where she actually used a potential opponent's name, but she put the primary blame on him for that, saying, "Look, I was just trying to compromise and get something and make that bill better, but I didn't like the underlying premise of it." Whether that exonerates Hillary, you can be the judge, but certainly Biden's fingerprints are all over that, and he can't walk away from that very easily. So, there's all sorts of things about Biden that he's going to have, that he hasn't had to suffer in a long time. And all the showering of love on him and all the drumbeats saying, "Oh, everyone wants you to run. Please, Joe, run, blah, blah, blah." All that ends on day one of actually entering the race, and all the other stuff comes raining down on you. So I don't know. I'm getting a little off track about the debate, but I don't know if you have any Biden thoughts that you think should be shared at this point.
Nope. Like Joe. I like Joe, and I wrote a piece years ago saying don't sleep on Joe Biden at the Daily Caller, and all the reasons, way ahead of the curve yet again. That's all I have to say. You heard it here.
But as far as the debate goes, so Hillary's going to try to take, I think, a very careful, nuanced approach to Bernie. No broadsides, but little things here and there. For example, she recently said that she wouldn't want to have a plan for free college for everybody because she doesn't want to subsidize Donald Trump's kids, which was an implicit swipe of what Bernie's trying to do. So you might see things like that. But I think the real wild cards for next week is what do Chafee and Webb and O'Malley do? We don't take them very seriously right now. They're scraping the bottom of the polls, but they get the same microphone everybody else does.
Oh, they're in it. They're in this thing. I didn't even know they were in it.
You may not know it now, but you might know it next week. And people thought Carly Fiorina wasn't going anywhere, and then she had a good debate, and now look where she is. So and you can look at examples from past Democratic debates where, for example, when Hillary got into trouble with immigration and driver's licenses in one of the 2007 debates where she seemed to be trying to have it both ways, it was Chris Dodd that called her on that and really humiliated her in that debate. Now, it didn't help Chris Dodd. Chris Dodd didn't get a delegate in that race, but he had a major impact on Hillary's campaign and the perception of that debate. So what their strategies are makes a huge difference to both Clinton and Sanders. Are they going to go after Hillary and join that pile-on? Or are they going to say, hey, Bernie's the one in my way. I want to be the alternative to Hillary. I got to find a way to take Bernie down. I know there's a risk involved. I know people are going to get mad on the left, but someone's got to do it, and why not me? And Jim Webb in particular, the most conservative guy in the race, he might be very inclined to go after Bernie's self-professed socialism and say, this is not going to sell in Appalachia where I'm from. This is not the way for Democrats to expand the party. Martin O'Malley has been probably the most pointed on gun control. He actually had a super PAC run a negative ad on Bernie, the only negative ad I've seen in this whole campaign. Maybe he's very pointed about gun control vis-a-vis Bernie next week. Who knows what Lincoln Chafee might do? So I think if you're going into this debate, you have to at least game out all the different scenarios, what they might do, and be prepared for that.
Let me make a quick point apropos of nothing, but to toot our own horns here, Bill, I should have brought this up last week, but the whole Kevin, what's his name, the whole Kevin McCarthy story. How he botched the Benghazi thing. Right. You know where that happened, right? We know where he got tripped up, right?
On Fox.
On Hannity. And what have you and I...
Right.
What have you and I... And I think you invented this, but what have you and I been saying for the last year or two about the dangers of a friendly network and a friendly audience?
Right. You let your guard down.
Yeah. And you're... So I think that's yet another example, right? We talked about this before about how, like, Jeb Bush, all of Jeb Bush's gaffes, not all, but they tended to happen, like, on Fox News. And isn't it interesting? And last night, as we're taping this on a Thursday, what day is it? It's Wednesday. As we're taping this, last night, Donald Trump went on Fox. And, I mean, Trump's sort of an asterisk because he's always saying interesting things, and who knows if it helps him or hurts him. But he talked about eminent domain as a great thing. But I would say, especially in the case of Kevin McCarthy on Hannity, yet another example of somebody going into supposedly friendly territory and saying something that gets him in trouble, with the larger audience. So anyway, just another,
I want to ask you more about McCarthy in a second, right. But there actually was a Boston Globe piece reviewing Bernie Sanders' history in debates. I mean, he has been in debates before. He has run for office many times. They're not as big as high stakes as what he's about to walk into. But there are examples of him losing his cool, getting insulted, getting red in the face, wagging his finger. Now, that has added to his image of authenticity in Vermont, where he's not putting on a happy, smiley, phony show for folks, but he's dealing with a very favorable constituency already in Vermont. If that happened, this time, that would certainly cast a pall. I think it would cast a pall. Look, we always have the Trump example where you can do no wrong and the polls keep going up regardless. So perhaps that might happen with Bernie too. But to the extent that he needs to get into the next phase of being taken seriously as a general election prospect, doing things that cut against that would not be helpful. And does a Chafee, O'Malley, or Webb say things, or the moderators say things that just get under his skin? Now, you could say he's been pretty polished so far. He's done a lot of interviews, hasn't really flown off the handle in the last several months. So the Globe piece said that his campaign tells them he's not doing debate prep or traditional debate prep, that he feels like he's got his rap down and doesn't need to do all the mock debates and whatnot. So if that's really true, maybe they're just doing some phony expectation setting. But he might find himself getting asked or being ganged up on in a way that he's not accustomed to, and that might lead him to fly off the handle.
I think maybe it's real and maybe it's smart. Donald Trump allegedly didn't do debate prep before his debates. If you
and it showed,
and he went up in the polls.
He had 2 bad debates,
and he went up in the polls.
Not the second, not after the second one. The second one he went down.
The first one's when he famously didn't do any debate prep, as I recall. But in any event, look, if you're trying to not be a conventional candidate and not sound like a conventional candidate, this is like opposite thing. Like, remember the George Costanza thing, where like, what if every instinct he has is wrong? So he goes up and meets women and says like, "Hi, my name's George. I'm bald, unemployed, and live with my parents." And the girl's like, "Good to meet you." It's like, what, like, right. What? Okay, so it's opposite, right? So George, Costanza wants to get like a tuna fish on rye, but instead he gets a chicken salad on wheat. Whatever it is, like the exact opposite. So like Bernie Sanders wants to be the opposite of a politician. So maybe you have to do things that politicians don't do. Politicians prep for debates. Maybe the way to not sound like a politician is to not prep for a debate. Be spontaneous. Shoot from the hip. I mean, well, I think it's
I feel the evidence of insurgents that go the distance, which by itself is extremely rare. Usually insurgents lose to the establishment candidate. But those that do make it, you give a couple examples where they didn't moderate at all. George McGovern and Barry Goldwater, but they lost in the end. But your movement candidates that did go all the way, and I would think Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama, they did play the game. They did shade here and there. They did make sure that they started to pivot from being a raw ideological candidate to a presidential candidate with gravitas who had a more sophisticated and nuanced take on things. So, I mean, it all comes down to what you're trying to get out of this whole endeavor. Bernie seems extremely disinclined to do the latter, but that usually is a recipe for hitting a wall and eventually fading away.
I know how you feel. I know how you feel about insurgents, and you're probably right about Bernie. But I do think that that there is a special moment that's happening right now that's rare, and I don't want to say unique, but that's rare, and that Bernie is tapping into the same sort of populist trend that Trump is tapping into, and there is that the question of when you stop being when you stop acting like an insurgent, you start being like the establishment. Therefore, your raison d'etre has been eliminated. So it's kind of a catch-22, If you start doing,
it's a tricky pivot to make. But if you want to go all the way, you got to make it and have it not seem. You can't be like Mitt Romney and have your campaign manager say it's Etch-a-Sketch time.
I got 4.
Let's shake it up and start to do something fresh.
4 words for you, Bill. Let Bernie be Bernie.
Okay. Well, if I may shift gears, should Republicans let Kevin McCarthy be Kevin McCarthy?
No.
We're taping on Wednesday. The House Republican caucus makes its nomination for Speaker on Thursday, but the actual vote for Speaker is with the full House, and that is set for October 29th. And as McCarthy's new rival, Congressman Jason Chaffetz, has said, I hear that McCarthy will not get the votes of 50 of the Freedom Caucus types on the final vote at the end of October. And if that was true, then he would not get the 218 votes he would need from the full House to actually become Speaker. So if on Thursday, I don't know exactly how things work, inside the caucus, if it's raising of hands or secret ballot or I thought it was secret ballot, actually.
Yeah,
now that I think about it. But if you have a secret ballot and McCarthy gets 190 votes, enough to get the nomination, but clearly losing a chunk, do they get to say, okay, let's rethink this thing because we might be sending this guy to the wolves in 3 weeks and sparking mass chaos? I don't know how that if there's a provision for a do-over in that instance.
Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but they do have to then have a floor vote later in the month, right? Where it's obviously not not binding.
That's where.
So the caucus.
The floor vote is.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, once they have that floor vote, if McCarthy ends up not having the votes, then you then spark this multiple vote process where, who knows what might happen. That becomes extremely chaotic and probably the last thing the Republicans want to have.
Yeah. And then, so as I think I said this last week, so what we didn't know last week is that the floor vote would be pushed back. I don't think we knew that. What I did allude to was, I think it's now the case. Yeah, it is now the case where the Speaker vote will happen first, and then once they decide the Speaker, then they'll have the other votes. They won't happen at the same time for the other leadership positions. And then I think we talked about how you can't retain your seat if you run for a higher seat. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think McCarthy still wins the speakership. I think my guess is because I think part of the problem is the people running against him, Chaffetz is the latest example, and there's just no stark contrast. There's no reason to believe that Chaffetz is a better conservative than McCarthy. So there's no real clear contrast. The people who are thought of as great conservatives aren't running and or wouldn't have the votes, and the people who are running or might have the votes, aren't thought of that way. So I think it's him. There's just no alternative.
Do you think Chaffetz is blowing smoke when he says, "I hear there are 50 people that won't vote for McCarthy on the floor"? You think he's making that up?
50 seems high to me. There's a contingent. 50 seems high, but Chaffetz, you got to remember, Chaffetz kicked off Mark Meadows briefly, or removed him from his leadership position in a committee that Chaffetz chairs. I guess was it because Meadows went up against Boehner. So this is a guy who why would you go with Chaffetz if you don't like the establishment? The only difference is he's not the heir apparent, but he's pretty recently was doing Boehner's bidding and punishing conservatives for standing up to Boehner. So I don't get why Chaffetz would be the great conservative hope. I just don't understand. So I think McCarthy. Well, I think McCarthy wins. I still think the real fights are going to be over the majority leader in the whip position. But I could be wrong. But that's my. But
just to stay on McCarthy for a second, I can see your point that people aren't jumping to Chaffetz or Daniel Webster. But is it possible that the Freedom Caucus people are so hell-bent on exerting their power and influence where it would be too enticing for them to not cause chaos on the floor? Because by by denying McCarthy the final vote, they are basically saying the speakership runs through us. You have to find a way to make us happy or nothing moves.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that I love Chafis or I love Webster. It just means you have to now jump through an untold number of hoops until you satisfy our demands.
Possible, but I think, the question is, are they willing to negotiate or do they just want to cause havoc? And so, I think McCarthy obviously needs to go to them and cut a deal. Who will he support for majority leader and or whip? Who do they want? And that would be the way. That would be the key to do that.
Who do they want?
Therein lies the problem, Bill. I don't. There's. I think the one person everybody likes is Jim Jordan, but I don't think it would be hard for him to win, no matter what. Maybe Peter Roskam. I don't know if they like him that much. Is he better than Tom Price? I don't know enough about it, to be honest with you. It's so.
But they certainly
so
haven't said outright you need to do They haven't said you have to do these three things to make us happy. They've been very coy what it is they actually are demanding.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, there really is no alternative to McCarthy. So it's not like they can pick. The Freedom Caucus can't pick the guy. They can cause people problems. So, are they going to decide to cut a deal with McCarthy and try to play a part in placing somebody that's acceptable to them in a leadership position in exchange for making McCarthy speaker? Or are they just going to kind of wreak havoc in the process and try to hurt McCarthy without, for what reason? Chaffetz is no better than McCarthy, and Webster seemingly can't win. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I need to make some phone calls, follow up on the latest developments. But I still think it'll be. I think it'll be interesting, really interesting to see what happens to Steve Scalise, and whether or not this delay helps him or hurts him. That's actually what I'm very. That's sort of like a subplot that I'm very interested in.
He's the current whip.
Yeah.
He was seen at the time as a sop to conservatives, but now he's been tainted by being part of the Boehner leadership team and having a hard time being elevated to majority leader now.
Yes, and a lot of conservatives don't like him, even though he's seen as the conservative in the leadership. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see if he holds on or not. And he might. And will this delay help him? You have to keep in mind, if McCarthy does cut a deal with the Freedom Caucus folks to become speaker, it would involve somebody potentially losing out who might have otherwise won the whip or the majority leader position.
I have to go soon, but I do want you to talk about this piece you just wrote for the Daily Beast, where you argue that Marco Rubio is the Trump slayer, that Trump has successfully pierced the facades of almost every other Republican candidate. He has been uniquely eager to mock their weaknesses and amplify their weaknesses, making it hard for anyone to want to take Trump on directly for fear of the blowback. But you're saying Rubio has not suffered the same consequences others have when Trump has trained his fire on him.
Yes. First, let me say I feel like my Frozen commentary was more poignant than my commentary on McCarthy. I'm more passionate. I'm more passionate in my opinions about Frozen than about who becomes Speaker of the House, and it shows. Yeah. So here's my observation: is that Trump has been really good at picking on people, trolling them, and making them look bad. And there are only two exceptions to that. And it's been really the last two examples. We've seen what he did to Jeb Bush, Scott Walker, Rick Perry, Bobby Jindal. But it hasn't worked on Carly Fiorina, for a variety of reasons, and it hasn't worked on Marco Rubio, as you mentioned. And my theory is it goes back to there's a great book called Bad Boy: The Life and Politics of Lee Atwater by John Brady. And basically, there's a great story where Atwater had a theory that some people were essentially adults and some people were essentially kids. And he figured out that Bob Dole was an adult. Therefore, the way to get under Bob Dole's skin was to do petty, silly, juvenile things. And that would get under Bob Dole's skin. And in fact, it worked. Remember, Bob Dole had his message, tell him to quit telling lies about me, about Bob Dole. Dole was an adult, and he couldn't stand the silly, petty, juvenile stuff, that psychological warfare that Atwater was throwing at him. And I think that that's what Trump is doing to some of these candidates is really getting under their skin with these really high school sort of comments, attacks, criticisms, one-upmanship. But it didn't work with Rubio. Rubio seems, he just trolled Rubio by sending him a care package of bottles of water and towels and talking about how Rubio sweats a lot. He's a sweater for a young guy. I've never seen a young guy sweat as much as him. And Rubio, I saw him on the Today Show yesterday, just sort of laughs it off. And it doesn't seem like he's just pretending to not care. It seems like Rubio's really just finds it kind of funny and really isn't upset by this. And my theory is that Rubio has this has preserved enough of this childlike bad boy quality that it doesn't bother him. And for whatever reason, there's certain people that things get under their skin, and there are other people that it doesn't. And I think that Donald Trump's problem may be that he's run out of Bob Doles.
Maybe. I think it's a little early to say that Trump can't take down Rubio. Now Rubio at this point, he's had a bit of a bump since the last debate. If you look at the Real Clear Politics average, he was down around 6 in the average, and now he's around 10. And there's certain polls where he's higher than 10. So there's some movement. It's not enormous movement. And it's only over the past couple of weeks, so I think it's a little early to say what the impact might be. And has Trump really gone full blast on Rubio at this point? I mean, Rubio still hasn't been a top-tier candidate as of yet, and he's sort of kind of edging towards that right now. But I think the water stuff is kind of the weakest attack you can do on Rubio. I mean, the biggest attack you can do on Rubio is how he handled immigration.
Well, he does that too,
which is in Trump's wheelhouse.
Trump does that too every time. Every time he mentions Rubio, he talks about quote amnesty.
Let's see in the next Republican debate if Trump goes to town on Rubio and immigration and how that looks after. If Rubio can survive that, because I think that's the biggest Achilles heel for Rubio.
Yeah,
the hardest. He can't really consolidate all the conservative factions if he's seen as fatally flawed.
Well, true, and we've talked before about how that is Rubio's Achilles heel, and that's the one time he's been really chastened and shaken and didn't look like himself when that went down, and all the conservatives turned against him over immigration reform. But what I'm talking about is when Trump talks about somebody's face or somebody's hair or somebody not being very tall. What's Rand Paul had it up to here with him or whatever. These are petty, juvenile, primitive attacks that we're not used to in the more civilized world, chivalrous world of politics, of modern politics, and that's what he's doing with Rubio, and I don't think it's working with Rubio. I don't think it worked with Carly. I don't think it worked with Rubio, but it worked with everyone else.
I mean, I don't know if that, saying that Rand Paul had an ugly face, I don't think that's what has taken down Rand Paul, or that Jeb Bush is low energy. I don't think that really amounts to very much. I think when Trump gets at the main political weakness of candidates, that tends to have more reverberation.
Yeah, but when I'm not talking about reverberation with moving the public, I'm talking about the psychological warfare of getting under their skin. And in this column at the Daily Beast, I talk about how Atwater figured out that Bob Dole was very sensitive to attacks on his wife. Well, that's the exact same thing that Donald Trump has figured out about Jeb Bush and has brought up Jeb Bush's wife and going after her. I mean, I think that it's that you just because the petty superficial attacks don't move voters doesn't mean they're not impacting the candidates and putting them on the defensive and sort of playing with their heads.
I'll leave it on that note. Always good to talk to you, Matt, here on the DMZ.
Oh, likewise, always good to talk with you.
Please pre-order Matt's book, Too Dumb to Fail, out in January. I've read the final manuscript. It is a masterpiece.
Yes.
So by all means, make sure you get your first copies.
Yeah, and I'd say buy more than one. I mean, you're going to want to. These are stocking stuffers. These are our graduation presents. These are multiple copies to be shared.
Groundhog Day presents, St. Patrick's Day presents. There's all sorts of reasons to give gifts. Why not? Why is that only have to be Christmas? I don't understand that.
Indeed. All right, thank you, Bill. And you got stuff in Politico, right? Politico magazine.
Well, there may be stuff in the next few days. Okay. Just keep clicking Politico a lot and see where my name comes up.
And stay tuned to our Twitter accounts. And follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Matt Lewis for Bill Scher saying, stay classy, San Diego.